We now focus on the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, an organization of which I think there is some level of vulnerability. That's my opinion. Maybe we can assess that a bit further on in the conversation. But joining me for this discussion this morning, I welcome a strategic security consultant and organizational transformation expert, Commander Garvin Heerah. He's with us via Zoom. Good morning, Commander Heerah.
Hi, morning to the host and to our team, as I said, and it's a pleasure to be part of the conversation this morning. Good day.
Well, thank you very much, Commander Heerah, for joining us. And as we get into this conversation, start off with police operations over the weekend. There were multiple exercises, inclusive of raids. It yielded very little results. Now, the police are always arguing that their intelligence gathering efforts are what allow them to conduct such exercises. But how do we assess these exercises and the effectiveness of their operations? Could we say with confidence that indeed the intelligence gathering of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, with the very little information that we have, yields some form of results that is helping the situation here in TNT?
Yeah, well, I must say, and it's an advocate being a former law enforcement officer, not every time that you go out on a raid or you go out on an operation, you would reap results or you would arrest some people. But what it is very important is that what we are seeing with the police service is that there has been some shift in how they are operationalizing back on the street, be it stop and search, be it that high visibility, or even with planned raids, as you would have articulated. Okay, so according to what we have received, there haven't been much results in that we thought that there would have been more arrests or more seizures. But there is also that effort of deterrence, because when you have law enforcement outside there, especially in certain areas with a large contingent or movement mobilizing, there is a deterrent in that the criminals are kept at bay. They don't come out to conduct a crime. You don't have that sort of, weekend of crime and killings that you would normally see, because there was some sort of pushback. There was a heavy presence of the law enforcement. So we won't always be privy as to what are the objectives of a weekend operation or nightly raids, or specific what we call surgical strikes or zonal raids in certain communities and high-risk zones. But maybe we don't know, and maybe it's a good time for the police service to even express that in their weekly brief, or when they come out and they speak to the citizenry as to what were some of the objectives of our recent remobilization or operationalization concerning operations and raids and that type of stuff. And as I said, remember, we will always be the last to know, because it is not in any normal sense of operations for the police service to say where they're going, what they're going to do, and what they intend to achieve. But there can be after-action briefs that tells us exactly what was done and why it was done, with the limitations of being able to share information in the public space. So I think it's a time to probably sit back and look and see again and continue our evaluation, because we are asking a lot of the police service, and they're stretched at their resources at this time, and we're seeing a lot of issues taking place in the environment, and we want results as the citizens. So I think it's good to bridge between we want results and the delivery of results, and see if there can be a commonality somewhere in the center.
Now, that's a very fair assessment, and there are many valuable points of which you've just raised. But let me start off with regards to what we're seeing now taking place with more organizational operations on the streets, as you would have mentioned, and even how it leads to deterrence. That is all well and good, but as the viewers are watching this morning, some of them might not feel that level of confidence that you have expressed. Again, given the instances of criminal activity here in Trinidad and Tobago, it also leads us to question our detection rate. How do we improve on these areas? Though we are seeing a shift, we don't have much time to rely on taking a slow shift to deal with bigger issues.
Mm-hmm. No, you're correct. And I would advise at this time, rather than there be conversations like what we're doing in certain pockets that would express or reveal the emotions, and that's a big word as we look at our society, the emotions of society, be it the emotions of fear, the emotion of being overwhelmed. There's an emotion of giving up at this point, almost just do as you wish, or there's an emotion where families are thinking, you know what, best I just leave this country because I don't know if I want to grow up in this country or grow my family or my children up in this country. So with that sensitization of the emotion of the citizens, I think we are in a good place at this time to conduct some sort of survey, some sort of poll that will give us the empirical evidence of how the society, how the citizens, how the customers of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and other law enforcement agencies are feeling right now based on the service and the delivery that we are getting. If there is an imbalance, if there are key areas, just as you said, maybe it probably is detection, maybe it's visibility, maybe it's how we are treated at police stations, maybe it's the cold cases that have been there and there's no continuance, no investigation. I don't know, there are a number of issues. We could actually structure those things and just do a 48-hour survey. You know, it could be a call-in program, it could be a poll. We have technology helps that now. And have some empirical evidence to show the police service. I hear what you guys are saying, and we've been at your community talk shops, and we've heard what you've said, looked at your briefs and that. But this is what the ground is saying. You are missing the mark. There are some gaps. There's some blind spots in X, Y. You know, about 4 or 5 areas. So it gives the police service some sort of, okay, this is happening here. We need to fix this, because sometimes there is a gap, a chasm in the middle, which prevents the connectivity between society or community and the police service. I know they're trying their best to fix that, but that comes with confidentiality and it comes with trust. And yes, we haven't spoken about it yet, but we still have the existence of rogue officers and certain police officers that the community don't trust and don't want to talk to. And that is giving a bad name to the entire police service. Mm-hmm. So there will always be challenges of trust and confidentiality, but it needs to start somewhere in order to fill that gap.
Does this lack of trust and confidentiality in the Trans-Tobago Police Service by citizens, because you're right, we do have media ambassadors at television stations across Trinidad and Tobago, and I see the efforts as it relates to media relations, but that lack of trust and confidence, does that expose the vulnerability of the Trans-Tobago Police Service when they may not have the support of the citizenry?
Yeah, it would. It would, because that has to be concretized. That has to be our main cornerstone as a police service. Do we have trust and confidentiality with those that we serve? And if the answer comes up with a heavy no, then we have to be able to identify what is causing that and do some introspection internally to be able to fix that. Walk-arounds and PR and pictures and putting it on pages and that type of stuff is not going to fix that. Because there will be an image and a brand that is trying to be created outside there that, you know, we're reaching out to the community or whatever. But there is also a continuity of what we'll call misbehavior, certain types of police actions outside there that is forcing the community to feel it's a we and them. And that needs to be fixed. And it's real. You know, people may want to dispute that with me this morning, but the police service needs to fix that aspect of it. And yes, we have raids, we have interceptions, we have people being caught, we have arms being seized to some extent. We have investigations taking place. We have murders that will be committed, and yes, we see arrests and people being brought before the court. What has to happen is that as a whole system, we need to begin marketing those successes against the ills and the damages that the negativity is causing, so that there becomes some sort of balance. And I think more emphasis needs to be paid on the accessibility at this time of the police service, so that it can smother and quell some of the negatives. But in the same breath, the citizenry need to see where the negative actions of the police service is being addressed and is being dealt with by the hierarchy, so that they don't think that it is a slap on the wrist or people just getting transferred. And that is important.
Commander Heerah, that's a very good point. Too often, and I may be guilty of this as well, sitting in my position, do we raise the negative aspects of operations by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There are quite a few positives that are within the media, but it's never highlighted enough. However, on that particular note, you may not be able to easily persuade or change the opinions or minds of the public. So perhaps greater focus needs to be on how police officers conduct themselves. Do you think that there needs to be emotional intelligence testing, or we need to assess the emotional intelligence of Trinidad and Tobago police officers simply for them to be able to relate to what the public is feeling, whilst also understanding that the reality that they face every day when they go on those streets, Trinidad and Tobago may not be entirely aware of these operations or what is being carried out or conducted?
Yeah, well, we have used the buzzword of emotional intelligence throughout all systems, all ministries, all government agencies, public and private sector, corporate sector. And it has become a new norm to be a great extent. And what we have recognized is that the environment has changed incrementally, and therefore the police service needs to adjust its narrative and also change incrementally. And it has to be, a more people-centered approach. We've heard that. We have seen some elements and touches where the police service is trying to do that, but that is not an overnight success. That is not something that you will go to a seminar workshop tomorrow and expect to see changes the next day. It has to have a business continuity. It has to be mandated, starting all the way back at the ranch, maybe a training from recruit training to the new officers, the new entrants that are coming in to begin going through this new approach of training and readiness for the streets and for the communities. And emotional intelligence plays a very integral role. A next big one is the practice of empathy. And that is not feeling sorry for people, but that is understanding the conditions and situations that the citizenry is in, and hence the reason they are requesting to you as the gatekeeper police officer some sort of solution to their problems. And it's not because we have citizen and police. What has happened, we see a mentality that when we have citizen and police, the citizen is already branded as a criminal. The citizen is already branded as someone who is going to get locked up or buffed or spoken to in a rough tone, and they are scared to approach the officer or approach the vehicle for fear of how they will be treated. And that is a serious concern, and we have to look at all of these issues. So, that reform that you're articulating here this morning needs to be heard by the senior executive, by the decision makers. And as I said, it has to be taken on board as a priority from the cradle all the way through as a career enhancement sort of approach and training. But then the next question, what about the senior officers? What about those who've been there 10, 15 years? How are we going to treat with that? And there are methodologies that can be used to bring that sort of new approach to the training and the readiness of the police service, who are already under pressure. I don't want you all to lose that, because this same officer that we are talking about, man or woman, out there on the patrols, the flashing blue lights, late at nights, early morning, trying to keep the community safe, has a life, has bills to pay, has a grocery shelf to face, has issues with the bank, has financial issues, issues in their marriages, issues in their relationship with their teenage children. And therefore, we have to understand, in order to have a holistic, healthy officer, that health and wellness has to be 360 degrees. Not only preparing the officer for his patrols and his law enforcement duties, but preparing the officer for life in general, outside of the uniform, at home, in their own communities and societies. They are citizens too, and therefore the hierarchy of the police service needs to understand this mantra, which I have used throughout, continually in my career.
Well, Commander Heerah...
One sec. Take care of your people, and your people will take care of your project. So it has to be taking care of the police officer, so the police officer will be able to take care of the communities or those that are under their watch. Thanks again. I'm sorry about that. Go
No,
ahead.
no, not a problem. But that's all well and good that you're saying. But then, by that argument and that logic, I could also say, here's what we also need to raise the recruitment standards. For police officers joining the service, because everything you suggested, people go through on a daily basis. That does not mean that it affects their professional capacities or abilities. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sound heartless, but sometimes there needs to be that separation where work could be stressful, but work is separate to what's taking place in your personal life.
No, you're correct. There's something known as the work-life balance. But what I was trying to bring a point, and I don't want you guys to lose this, is that we are talking about a normal person too. Yes, they're in police officers' uniforms and they're doing a high-risk job outside there. But they're normal citizens and they face the issues of life. And there are some challenges outside there. So yes, you're supposed to be able to deal with that, but also apply yourselves professionally. And I'm saying it also must pay into consideration here, working in a high-risk zone, day in, day out, your life is on the line, and having to face the challenges that we just talked about in a socio-economic realm has a mental effect. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we have to be able to be proactive and predictive as decision-making and as the hierarchy to understand where our people is, where I, as Constable John, is. Corporal Smith probably won't be, male or female. We might be at different levels of capacity to deal with the stress and to deal with the job. And therefore, there has to be mechanisms, back to the two words we started with, confidentiality and trust, to be able to take care of our employees so that employees can take care of the task that is ahead of them. In this case, it's civil streets, high-risk zones, men with AR-15s, vehicle home invasions and attacks, and you have to be able to be the gatekeeper to keep that in a safe and secure zone. So it's a holistic thing. So I'm not making excuses for the police service. I'm saying there are a number of areas that needs improvement and development, and that is not only fixing the stats of the homicides and the crime and the issues, it's fixing the stats of the holistic officer, the wellness, the development, the improvement of that officer to be able to meet those demands and deliver a service that can reduce the stats.
Given our resources and the focus on the lack of resources, some police officers are making the argument that it's not the lack of resources, it's the management of resources that is key to trying and helping the police service resolve their operational issues in the fight against crime. Do you think that and this may be a rhetorical question to the viewing public, but does the criminal element in Transbago have the upper hand when it comes to resources? You mentioned AR-15s, you mentioned assault weapons, and that is something that has been highlighted most recently about a ban on assault weapons. But do you think criminals here in TNT have the upper hand when it comes to this war?
Yeah, I will never give credence to the criminal community, because they're now a community, over law enforcement or national security. They will never have the upper hand. I will never, as an optimist and as someone who have taken these scars and the hits and been out there in the streets and understand how this thing operates, I would never give that sort of verbal credence. But what happens, and we can't lose this, is that whole thing that we talk about social media, the criminal network have been able to use social media to promote themselves, be it in the line of music or gangster or lifestyle, you've seen that. And it seems sometimes when a crime is committed and people are not held and a family is in fear and there's blood and there's hurt and there's pain and there's sorrow and there's weeping, it seems to us there's that sort of psychological impact. Whoa, like these guys have the upper hand, boy. But we as law enforcement, we as the citizens have to continue to prove them wrong. And therefore, we have to be able to go into the areas and the spaces. And I'm not talking geographically here. I'm talking also in cyberspace, also in social media, and police that so that we can effectively apply certain tactics in order to treat with that, to bring down the the mentality of our citizenry to think or to give credence that, you know what, it seems like the criminals has the upper hand. There are ways we have to begin, and almost like overnight, like yesterday, to start treating with that. Because what the criminal is doing is using a sort of ideological sort of brainwashing to our young people and even to our citizens, and the violence and the headlines and the sensationalism is just giving oxygen to this thing so that it allows it to respire and to breathe and to appear and based on how we look at it, as though there's an upper hand by the criminals. Law enforcement never give that sort of leeway to the criminals, and they need to move hard to bring that under control.
Commander Heerah, my final question to you this morning is, after everything that you've suggested and said, and I must agree with many points that you've raised, some we will differ on, but how important is it now that, given the ideology and even social media giving oxygen to the psychological elements that are being deployed by criminals, how important is it for the Trans-Tobago Police Service to hold post-media briefings, and I phrase it that way, to inform the public as per the exercises, as per their operations, as per their raids? Keep them informed, keep them up to date. Is it giving away too much, or is it important in tackling the crime situation here in TNT?
No, media management is an integral tool to the work of law enforcement. And what I will say is that the police service will probably need to review their media management practices. And it's not only a weekly police brief where stats and information and updates are given, but if you are to look at international best practices, be it a serious crime or be it a normal, what we'll call a road traffic accident or something, when you look at foreign systems, you would see on the scene, at the site, a media brief is set up.
Yes.
And the senior investigator or the police officer who is on scene at that point takes controlled questions from the media, guided, but there is a sense of, we are honest and this is what is expected, and we will provide the updates and results in due course. But you hear from the police service or the agency right away. There's a face, there's a microphone, and they take questions and answers on the site. We have to shift around a little bit and start doing some of that. And yes, you see attempts of doing it, but media management has to be a training and a development and a best practice that needs to be adopted by the police service so that the communication is effective, it is accurate, and it is transmitted via a medium that is received, that will provide feedback that is positive and bridge the gap between citizenry and law enforcement.
Commander Garvin Heerah, thank you very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate all that you have shared with us. Certainly is a lot to digest, but very valuable when trying to get another avenue, another perspective for the all-encompassing situation here in TNT. But thank you very much, sir.
Definitely.
Have a good day.
You all have a great day. Thanks again. It was a pleasure.
All the best.